Today in Grand Thumb, we're going to be talking about winter combat setups. This is part of our larger Recce Becoming Deadly in the Mountain series. What you have to understand is when we talk about winter, I understand all you guys out in Florida, winter might mean 70 degrees. So we're going to quantify it as 32 degrees and below for our winter combat setups. So you have to understand when we talk about just temperate setups, anywhere from 33 degrees all the way to the max temperature somewhere on the earth of like 124, somewhere right around there, or a little bit hotter. You think about that giant temperature range and the differences in clothing that you're going to wear in those different environments. When we talk about winter setups, you have to understand that we're talking about 32 degrees down to around -80. So think about that huge variation in temperature, very similar from 33 to 124. So there's a lot of different setups that we're going to be talking about. Now, to help me with today's video, I have Adam from Spiritus Systems. Adam, thank you for coming on to the channel today.
Thanks for having me once again.
I appreciate you, man. So for me, my experience, my background is as a survival, evasion, resistance, and escape instructor for the United States Air Force. Spent a lot of time teaching in the winter as well as Arctic survival, spending time in the Arctic Circle, quite a bit of time, too much time. For Adam, he was a NATO Death Squad member.
Blue helmets, all the way.
So when we're talking, I'm going to be speaking more to the survival, the post fall of civilization aspect to how you would conduct yourself in a frigid temperature. And Adam will be talking more to what?
So I'm going to talk more about basic skills for winter warfare from like the infantryman perspective, essentially.
Awesome. So it's going to be a good time. So understand that what we're teaching here, we can't possibly teach you guys enough in this, 30, hopefully 40-minute video, right, Micah?
Something like that.
So we're not going to be able to teach you everything here. This is something that you need to get out, that you need to actually do. Even with a month, with 2 months out in the winter, you're still not going to be an expert at this. So this is going to be something that's going to be that you need to continually do to keep your skills refreshed, keep your gear constantly up to date, and making sure that you're making smart choices based on your environment. Get in the comments, make this a place of learned men. Like, put good comments in there. If you have a lot of experience in these winter conditions, please, I'd love to hear all your tips and tricks because we only know what we know and what our experiences have been. So hopefully the comments are awesome like they have been in the other Recce series of videos, and I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, me too.
So it should be a good time. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna get into it. Now, before we get started, we do have to thank the sponsors of this channel. The Sonoran Desert Institute, if you're looking to get your start in gunsmithing, they are awesome. We can't thank them enough for sponsoring this channel. A big thank you to them. We of course have what, Micah?
Primary arms, and their optics work in the snow.
They actually do. They've done, the Prism is actually a good choice. A big thank you to them for sponsoring the channel, and unlike the phone that you're watching this on, the camera that we're filming this on, AAC Ammunition is made in America. Go and give them your support. We can't thank them enough for sponsoring the ammo for this particular channel. Not as much shooting on this particular video, but they are mega based. Is that the, let's go and let's get into it. Yeah, jump to start this one. Ready? Hey, welcome back. So, getting into it, there are a lot.
Fucking dumb.
So getting into it, there are a lot of things that we can talk about. We're going to be talking about 3 main topics today. The first one is going to be clothing. Then we're going to be talking about combat setups, which is going to include anything from the kit we're wearing to the rifles that we have on us. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about sustainment. Again, this is a very large, broad topic. We'll try to get as much of it as we can. Now, going straight into it, let's talk about clothing.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's going to go boom, clothing.
Yeah, clothing.
We're going to go ahead and we're going to broach the most, is it controversial topic?
Yeah, I would say
snow camouflage?
I would say it's the most controversial.
All right, let's talk about it. So to start off with, snow camouflage. What do you want to say about it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of arguments for how to camouflage in a winter warfare environment, and defining winter warfare as we did, it could potentially not have any snow, right? It could just be open terrain, still just very cold.
So you're telling me not to look like a Yeti, just completely white.
Yeah, we want to avoid being, camouflage principles are the same, regardless of the environment.
Sure.
So we want to avoid being solid with any color. Right, we want variation. When we're talking about like target detection metrics, we're looking for the humans are mind is conditioned to look for the human humanoid shape, right? So anything we can do to break that up. Snow, very pure white snow, is maybe one of the only exceptions where it is acceptable to start having more of a solid color palette on your kit. But generally we don't find that environment, right?
The one guy living in the North Arctic, you know, was like, well, Adam, I do.
Yeah, well, in Arctic, right?
Yeah.
When we get into the Arctic regions, we're looking at the traditional over white, you know, over white pants, bunny boots are even white, over white top, helmet cover, face mask, everything can be white. But anywhere below that region is going to be mixed in with some kind of different camouflage variation, and admittedly over whites that have slight color variation still are preferable to solid white.
Agreed.
Solid white, such as this one, I brought this one along, which you guys commented, it is brand new. It looks like a science lab coat. One of the things I'll say about all of your over whites is that they don't work better when they start to get soiled. So a misconception, something I hear thrown around a lot is, you know, just let it get dirty. You actually want to try to preserve the crisp white on there. But this is, I think it's the M51 designation. It's nylon, so it's not very heavy. It has its own little stuff pouch. This is military issue. You can find these at surplus stores. Most troops in Alaska probably still get issued these. Fort Drum is going to get issued these. You can take like green spray paint and some grass and just hit this with paint. That's why I prefer just the solid white for me, is because I can take this, they're relatively cheap, and if I know I'm going to a different region, like say here in Idaho where there's a lot of brown grass, I could take browns and add that in. If I'm going to somewhere where there's a lot of evergreen trees, then I can add green into it, just using a little bit of paint. It's very easy to go dark on a white surface, so.
Can't go back from there.
You can never go back.
There are a ton of camouflage patterns when it comes to snow. It's going to be situationally dependent, environmentally dependent. I see a lot of arguments right now, especially in terms of, do you wear the over white top, do you wear the over white bottoms? And it's going to be, it depends. In a forest environment, you're going to want to do probably bottoms. And now in an environment like this where it's splotchy against hillsides with rocks, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So again, it's going to depend on your environment. So the first thing we want to do is ensure that we're not a casualty of just trying to purely live. So we're going to start at the very bottom of our bodies right here with our feet, which is Adam's favorite part, and talk about what's the most important ways to keep ourselves from dying. So we're going to talk...
For the record, feet are my least favorite part of the discussion, but yeah, continue.
So when we talk about feet, the most important thing is going to be keeping them as dry as possible. Here's where it gets weird. I can say what I believe, what I do for my feet, and you can have a guy in the very same unit that I was in be like, that's bullshit, I never did that, that's incorrect. Everybody's bodies are a little bit different. Some people are super sweaty, like Adam, some people aren't as sweaty. So you're gonna have different things that you need to do with your socks, whether it be how often you rotate them out, etc. But keep your feet as dry as possible. So merino wool socks is pretty much the go-to, whether it be Smart Wool, Darn Tough. Those are the two brands that we were mostly issued. It's what I've used anywhere from, you know, Washington to the Arctic Circle, and they've all worked very well for me. Same for your socks?
Yeah, I agree, and I think that, you know, we're constantly combating, just like a note on the whole winter warfare thing. You're really, it's different than any other environment.
Sure is.
In terms of, you know, how we fight wars, or how traditionally Western countries fight wars. We're very good at, you know, in an infantry unit, being like, we're gonna occupy this area. There's gonna be no lights. There's gonna be no sounds. You're gonna lay in a hole somewhere, and you're just gonna accept the environment for what it is. That can't happen in the winter warfare environment. You cannot ignore it anymore, right?
Yeah, you cannot. And I made that mistake when I was in the Arctic Circle. I didn't have the correct footwear on, which we'll talk about in just a moment, and my toes started going numb. And I've dealt with it before in less cold environments, you know, like 10 degrees. I was like, it's fine, they'll warm up, but it was negative 60 on that day. And sure enough, I got frostnip on my feet because I wasn't handling it correctly. And I felt really dumb because I was an experienced guy. That really shouldn't have happened, but I let it lapse for an hour, and that was all it took. So big thing is going to be, it sounds so stupid, changing your socks, right? Keep making sure that you keep dry socks on. The typical way of handling it is the used socks, the wet socks, tuck them in your waistband. As you move, your body heat will help dry them out. Or when you sleep at night, put them under your lower back or underneath your knees. That will help them dry out as well throughout the night. That goes for all of your clothes as well. Under the knees is what I typically did if I had a sleeping bag, if I was sleeping in it.
Absolutely.
From your socks, by the way, don't double sock it. That's too much pressure. So right here we have Loas, which are really good boots down to around 10 degrees. These are Gore-Tex. They'll keep a lot of the water out. However, what I found is that continuous movement, not just for a day, because I hear a lot of people argue that, oh, I use these boots for hunting and they're fine. And we're not talking about just like a day or two of being out in this environment. We're talking months, we're talking possibly a year of living in an environment and what boots do best. Typically, full grain leather.
Yep, agreed.
What we were issued were the Kenetrek Mountain Hunter 400s. I've had mine since 2014 when they were first issued. And long as you treat that leather with snow seal or some type of wax sealant, they're gonna last you a very long time. If you get any gaps, fill those in with shoe goo or some type of super glue. That's gonna keep them operational for a long period of time. What was your kind of go-to boot for these environments?
Yeah, so I mean, I use a mixture of, I've actually just got the Kenetreks on your recommendation. Been using them now for exactly 1 day. Great so far.
Baby's
so
first
I can't really
Kenetreks.
speak to the Kenetreks, but I used full leather Oslo boots for a long time. Same principle. They're not they don't have as tall of a...
The A-Solos.
Yeah,
we were issued those as well.
Yeah,
they're awesome.
Yeah, and they're leather. They have synthetic versions as well. I prefer the leather. Same reasons. They can be treated. They can be field repaired. There's a lot of nuance to leather, but you can maintain it longer. And the synthetics, once they become permeable, once water has soaked through, you're done for the duration of that.
Hello, frostbite.
Yeah, you're going to get frostbite for sure.
It's going to be over. So to treat them, what you're going to do is you take, in my case, snow seal, smother that wax on, hit it with a heat gun that's going to permeate and soak into the leather, and you're going to keep doing that until it no longer soaks in. Those treatments will typically last you on heavy movements around 5 to 7 days depending on temperature, and then you'll need to retreat those. So if you're not heating that leather up and getting that wax into the leather, it's not going to last very long at all. So you need to make sure that you do heat those boots up.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I mean, generally, a leather boot I would use in, that subalpine terrain where I don't need any kind of crampon or anything like that. If we're, so we're kind of framing this in that environment. I just want to put out for all the alpine guys, we know there's a different boot style, a two-piece boot we're going to wear when we go above the snow line up there, or the alpine line, and we start trekking around with crampons on, and in a wet environment. So if you're in somewhere like Fort Drum, right, in that region where you have a lot of lowland, a lot of swamp actually, and it's cold, very cold, we're going to switch over to the military issued bunny boots. Yep. Right, they have vapor boots that have, you have an air layer, but they are 100% non-permeable. So you can trudge through a swamp, or you can have a lot of mud, and your feet are never going to they just can't get wet, but they will sweat more. You'll have more, you'll lock in moisture. So it's the same principles with socks. You have to be changing your socks out constantly to keep the inside of the boot dry.
And that's how I got frost snap on my toes. I should have been wearing bunny boots that day.
Sure.
Again, the Kenetreks will work down to around -20, -30. Below that, put mucklucks over them, and then when you get down to about, honestly, -40, I'll probably move over to a bunny boot.
Boots.
That's enough on boots. Kind of in conjunction with those, you should wear gaiters. That's kind of a go-to. Gaiters are like my best friend from 50 all the way to almost -80. They work in every environment. They're going to keep a lot of that moisture from getting into your sock. Highly recommended. There's a lot of good companies. I generally would say Audi Gear is kind of one of my favorites right now that I use quite a bit. Are you with the outdoor research?
I have. That's what I currently have.
Yeah. Yep. Both are really good. Find one that works for you. We were issued the black ones back in the day, but now the technology is good where it can be multicam.
Coyote.
Probably don't buy the multicam Alpine unless you're always in the snow.
Always in the snow.
But again, gaiters. Going up to pants. This gets pretty nuanced as well.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to this?
Yeah. So for tactical movement, I'm
all the layers, right?
No,
Sweat.
I'm not wearing anything. I'm wearing something. You guys are going to edit that into something.
It's something bad, yeah. It's not good for you.
For tactical movement, I'm not wearing a lot of layers. I'm going to wear just my uniform layer, maybe a base layer under that. Depending on how dry the snow is, I may opt for a soft shell. Part of the EQUIC systems that the Army issues has a soft shell layer. So I may wear, if it's very extreme cold, I'll wear a base layer with that over the top of it. When we start getting into, with war fighting, we're often in a transitional environment where you're carrying heavy loads because it's snow. We have to carry a lot more stuff, double everything. And so we're gonna be carrying all that weight. You're just gonna sweat. I've tried everything. Every 25-mile road march that I did, I would try different things. What I always came back to is that preserving my hands and my feet and my ears and my face are really the only things that I can manage. The rest of my body is just gonna be soaked. And I'm gonna manage the body heat issue when I stop.
100%.
Right? I'm gonna take wet layers off, I'm gonna put on different layers and then go static. And then when I start moving again, I'm gonna put that wet, shitty stuff back on.
Dry it out.
And then start going.
When we talk to the survival side of things, it's going to be a little bit different. A big thing for us is the big mantra, for my SEER guys are going to know, or people who've been to SEER, it's ration, sweat, not water. What we mean by that is drink water. You need to drink the water, but sweat is, if it can be avoided, avoid it. We say a lot in survival, be as lazy as you can, and that certainly applies in a more survival, more society's broken down environment like what I'm going to be speaking to. So generally what we say is start cold. I'm sure that's something you've been told as well. In the military it was easy because if somebody didn't want to be cold, you could order them to be cold and they'd have to take off layers.
Take your layers
take
off.
That layer off. On your own, you're gonna have to be a little bit more disciplined. Make sure that you start cold because the last thing that you want to be doing is sweating, because especially as we get into those frigid environments, 0 to -50 and below, you start sweating and you stop, that sweat's going to freeze and you're looking at some very serious complications from that. So the last thing that we want to do in those very cold environments is sweat. So you need to make sure that you are using layers to ensure that you're not getting to that point. And so just like Adam said, typically just combat pants, or if it's really wet, maybe some type of soft shell. Gore-Tex is kind of my last resort because Gore-Tex is loud. And it could possibly telegraph your position in certain situations. So again, find what's gonna work depending on how cold it is and go from there. But generally, pants don't need insulation as far as I'm concerned until you get into negative. Until you
or
get
static, highly static. And that's all the caveat to everything is if you're posting, winter warfare, again, a tactical movement is gonna consist of maybe a platoon size element or a company size element moving in echelon or whatever to get to a location. And it's not the same as, traditionally most infantrymen recognize setting up a patrol base. You kick out your security, the command center goes in the, start priorities of work, and you just kind of dig in and suffer. But it's not really suffering because it's pretty warm and you're fine. Maybe you're sweating actually because it's just like it's a jungle. So you're not doing things the same. In the winter warfare environment, we're selecting a location. We're doing a really, really big dog leg in. We're setting in like an ambush line to cover, our tracks that we just walked through. And then we're setting up an Arctic tent. Priorities of work are very different. We have a lot of static positioning. We have guys going out on security who might be there for a few hours. And so then that's when we start having, heavier layers and even pants, right? To where you have you're asking a guy to lay in the snow in the prone static for an hour plus in negative temperatures. He's got to have loft layers and things like that. But for movement, you just can't afford to have the layers on. You're going to start cold, you're going to end wet, and then you're going to have to transition that clothing off because your layers are really there to keep you dry, and being dry is what keeps you warm.
So we're going to go to the most important thing, which is going to be the torso. So the torso gets hot quick. There's a lot of blood flow there. So the most important rule is cotton kills. Stay away from cotton as much as possible. Use a athletic performance tee, some type of inner wool layer. Right here I have the First Spear wool t-shirt on. That works really well. No cotton t-shirts though, bad.
Just never cotton.
From there, this is going to be completely dependent on the temperature at which you're at. But in general, you want a wicking layer, an insulating layer, and a weather layer. Now those can be stacked in a lot of different ways. Generally, how I would typically run it down to any temperature is obviously the wool undershirt. I would almost always use the waffle top. That's like a given for almost every environment because it's so versatile and it works so well. And then depending, I would either use an Arc'teryx Atom LT. Now I'd probably go to Audi because I don't like Chinese companies.
Synthetic.
Exactly.
Something synthetic.
Exactly, to keep you really warm. And then typically it's going to be my camouflage layer over that. So in this case, I have an overwhite over that. This is from ArcKiss. That works well. If I don't use that, I'll typically use a multicam wind shirt. I've worn that tons of times, and that's what's worked really well for me.
Yeah, and so on the, for me, on the tactical side, Again, usually movement is, either movement to a patrol base or movement to contact. So we're going to want to be able to rapidly shed layers, and that's kind of the name of the game for like how am I surviving? I'm on my snowshoes and I'm kind of trudging along, and then we make contact. How am I ditching that equipment? And how, making decisions on where that equipment's going to go if I'm ever going to be able to recover it. Again, we're fighting, people and an environment, which is, it changes how we react to things. So this is kind of the bread and butter. This is the level 7 Parka. This is the Air Force cut issued one.
They rock.
A little long. It's a linebacker size.
Go Air Force.
So if you're short like me, it goes really, really far down, almost to your ankles. If you're a little taller like you, like a tiny bit taller, then
You're not that short.
yeah, I'm not that short.
Yeah, he's
I'm not
like completely average.
Ooh,
Some
you
would
can't say
say
that.
big.
Yeah, big. Yeah, no, I'm not. But for you, it would go a little bit, maybe above the knee or right at the knee. So that's a layer though that I can put over pretty much everything that I'm wearing to stay warm. And then if I need to, I can rapidly just, shed it. You guys have seen in the other video, mine's modified. I do have clips that I just clip this into my carrier, into my chest rig so that I can retain it. If I pull my arms out of the sleeves, I can still, bound forward, fight, maneuver.
Like a cloak.
It's a cloak, yeah. It's definitely a cloak. Downside is that when you're wearing like a high loft, it's hard to camouflage. It's gray. It doesn't blend in very well, and it's kind of difficult to wear the overwhite top over it. My overwhite top is actually part of the layering system for me because there is like a minor amount of with this nylon version, wind cutting, also a little bit of warmth from it, especially when you're moving. Quick drying material, so I would integrate that in there. But the layering is pretty much the same as what you described. Once we get to where we're going,
100%.
right? You're gonna take off like a lot of the sweaty stuff. You're gonna put on. I'm preserving a lot of my waffle top or like something like this, the synthetic fleece. I'm preserving that, and then I'm putting that on when I get somewhere after I've dried my torso off. I'm gonna start putting layers on to try to retain the heat that I've basically generated from moving.
Agreed on all that. And that kind of gets us to our hands right here. So this is going to be really important because of any area you're going to get frost snip, it's probably going to be your fingertips or your toes. Gloves. You need to keep your hands warm, and in many environments you 100% need them. There are many options out there. So one that I'll speak to right off the bat is going to be an inner liner. This is going to be important. They can be something like this where it's a simple synthetic, very thin layer. You can use the United States government issue wool. Those work really well actually, and they're super cheap. To be clear, you don't need to spend a lot of money to get good kit.
Not at all.
If you're wearing a liner, often for really cold environments, so like in the Arctic, whether it be using big old mitts, again, United States government issue and extremely effective. I've used this exact pair of gloves in the Arctic Circle, and they did awesome in keeping my hands warm. Because when you keep your fingers together, they stay a lot warmer. So as cool as all these like very cool tactical gloves are, if you're in a very cold environment, you need mitts. Right here we have surplus Swiss shooting gloves. As you can see, we have a little finger right there. It looks a little awkward, but you can still pull a trigger even with these mitts on. So these are generally what I use when I'm in a really cold environment. I'll use a combination of the SKD Pig winter gloves along with the mitts, and that tends to work really well until it gets incredibly cold and I need to move to big old fat mitts. Is there, I don't know, anything that's different for you?
Yeah, I mean, same principles. Again, for kind of that winter warfare, we're gonna always have our mittens on us, kind of as an SOP. They're gonna be worn like a child, like a small child.
Around your arm.
Yeah, it's gonna be around your neck,
Mm-hmm.
and you're gonna have them. If you don't need them at the moment, they can be draped. You can also clip them to your belt. Just keep them on hand. We're all on hand. That was a joke, dude. That was
good.
One.
You're getting
we're
there.
We're definitely gonna have that. As far as liners
Grand
go,
thumb is wearing off on you or wearing onto you.
Fingers are those. That looks weird. Fingers are so important to, everyday life, even if you're not in a combat area. But they're so critical that, we would always carry multiple pairs of the liners. You need to be able, again, keep your hands dry. And if you ever misplace one or drop a glove somewhere or something, you have a backup, you have a spare set. And I just brought, I don't carry every single pair of these, but there's different options like full synthetics, usually when it's a little less cold. And then we start getting into like heavier fleeces, which all of these can be worn underneath like a big mitten like this. I've still found that these leather mittens, these are very old issue.
They rock.
Yeah,
I love
they're
them.
great mittens, and I still haven't really found anything that's better as far as
They're like $10.
yeah, you can get them off. I mean, you can get them at any surplus store. They have, they have a liner that does go in them. You can buy extra liners. You can swap them out. And as far as keeping your hands warm for like sentry duty, duration stuff, right?
They're
Again,
awesome.
that guy who's got to just be on the line, he's going to keep his hands inside of these mittens. Your trigger guard on your weapon is actually designed, if you have a standard, like a Stanag version, not billet or something like that. That trigger guard has a pen that you can swing your trigger guard down. That's why it's actually a mitten access for your carbine, so you can drop that. And I'm just saying, if you have a full mitten like this, you can still use your firearm with the mitten on, which it does get cold enough on the planet to where you could be sustaining a combat operation and wearing a high loft top and mittens. It's possible. Yeah,
Definitely
it's
been
possible.
proven fairly recently.
Yeah, it's possible. So
It's very possible.
knowing those techniques, the Army does make an issued set of trigger mittens as well. I found them to not be anywhere near as good as these
those.
ones.
Yep,
So
I agree with
I
you
would
on that.
stray away from those. Those mittens are also good.
Find the ones that work for you. Again, it's going to be environmentally dependent and also dependent on you, on how much you sweat if you're a very sweaty man. Finally, moving over to the head. There's a lot of talk here because typically if you're at danger of being shot at, you're going to have a helmet on. So a lot of people get pretty, confused, heated, unsure of how to integrate head warming along with the helmet. And the best way to describe it is, if it's cold enough to where you need some type of beanie, something to keep your head warm, otherwise you're gonna go hypothermic, then you're gonna have to accept the fact that it's going to lift the helmet off of your head a little bit more. Again, without that, if you're gonna die, then clearly you have to accept that kind of trade-off. Nothing's free in Waterworld, right, Micah?
No free lunch.
No free lunch.
Waterworks.
In Waterworks.
None.
But there are a lot of different companies who make liners that are specific for helmets to be worn in helmets. Typically, I've just used the old issued Polartec.
Yep.
This pullovers.
The fleece beanie.
They're
Yeah.
cheap. They're like $5,
They are.
and you can just get them from a surplus store. You don't need to spend a bunch of money on winter
No.
gear, and especially when this video comes out, it's kind of getting to the tail end of winter. Get all those deals.
Get all the deals,
I
for
know.
sure.
I'm here for you. I'm a man of the people.
I would caution people against buying any in this category. The issued Polartec fleece hat, great option. You can find them at surplus stores, especially in like the ACU palette, like ACU Army Combat Uniform, the ugly one.
Yeah.
You can find a lot in that. You can find, this is Smart Wool. This is a wool one. This is just more of a liner, and these work great for movement. When you're moving and it's still cold enough to where your ears are gonna maybe get frost nip, this will you'll sweat on the top, but the sides will stay relatively dry.
They're
keep your
very
ears.
nice.
So this will fit under your helmet really
It's very
well.
impressive.
Something thicker, like this.
I don't know why you said that to me. It's so
thicker.
weird.
You're just a thick boy, dude. So
Dang.
something like this is going to be when we go static.
I have been
We're
working out.
gonna pull that out again. This is something that gloves, hat, gloves, and some kind of non-permeable layer or something that always go on patrol with me, no matter what. So I'm gonna have a hat of some sort. I think that the Army issued, the thing I want to caution you about, the Army issued watch cap, which is an acrylic wool blend.
Oh, yeah.
Just don't buy those. If you find a true wool blend, like a merino wool, like the beanie that
good,
we sell, right? That one is a true, it's not gonna make your head itchy. If you buy an acrylic or a polyester blend beanie, that's where you're gonna get that weird head itch.
Yeah, where you
yeah, you can just feel you don't want that, and especially none of those versions are gonna work under a helmet.
Kind of get a little shiver
Too
when you
thick.
scratch it, though. It feels good.
No, I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
I'm kind of addicted to it at this
It's
point.
gross.
So we've talked a lot about clothing. The point is, the reason why we spent so much time on it is you don't want to die simply from the elements. Now, we've talked all about the clothing. We're going to get into the combat sustainment. But the funniest thing about this is the first thing we're going to talk about when it comes to combat sustainment is going to be water, because you can't fight without water. And Obviously, in when it's getting closer to 32, it's really not that difficult to get water. You can get it from frozen rivers and streams. In that case, just use iodine tablets. They take a lot longer to work in those environments. Make sure you wait about double the time for it in that case. Don't forget to turn your canteen upside down, unthread the cap a little bit, let that iodine run into those thread caps, because if you don't get those thread caps, you can still get giardia from the edges of it.
Yep.
But where it gets a little bit crazier is when we get into the truly cold Arctic temperatures. So that's what I'm going to speak to mostly. In those environments, the only way to keep water from freezing is to actually have it within your layers. And for people who haven't been in those Arctic conditions, it might seem a little bit odd because you've always heard, I know back in the day, they're like, never get water in your layers because then it's gonna blow up and then you're gonna freeze to death. But the only way to keep water from freezing is to have it on your body. Usually I keep it just over my fleece. You can see a picture right here from me in the Arctic Circle. You see that little red string that I have on, and that's a little bag of water. And then as I'm moving, as I'm doing combat movement, or as I'm, in my case, surviving or thriving, as we like.
Sure.
Why
Thriving.
survive when you can thrive?
Sure.
I'm feeding it with snow. You're not packing it into it, but you're feeding it as you're drinking to make sure that it's melting. Because again, if you feed too much, you're going to really sap your body heat. It's definitely a balance. The fact of the matter is that being in those environments is just really tough on the human body.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's not a whole lot you can do besides a little bit of suffering.
True. That's very true. I have a mulligan here with clothing now.
Hit me.
I want to talk about the booty.
Oh God.
I want to talk about the booty for a second.
Okay, talk about the booty.
So for the alpine guys, they're going to recognize looks a lot like an inner boot for a hard shell mountaineering boot. These are, I wouldn't say that they're critical, but what I've found is that when we get into patrol-based activities in winter warfare, there's a lot of things that we're keeping outside. So we're keeping our weapons outside,
Yes.
which is unfamiliar to most people, but we're also keeping our boots, especially if they're a shelled boot, we're keeping that outside. But you can wear those inner boots, as kind of a booty inside your sleeping bag to keep your feet, generally your feet get cold very quickly. A lot of hard for circulation, you can get down there. So you can wear those, but if you're wearing something like a Kenner Trek, and these are very light, there's not a big penalty, but they're great for those patrol-based activities.
Yes.
Right, getting boots dry, if you're using some kind of stove and everybody is putting their boots in to get them dry, which happens.
Nice. You guys get stoves.
You got to carry it, man, or else you're gonna die.
Yeah.
So we, you can put all your boots somewhere to dry, and then you can still have footwear that if something did happen, I mean, you can cinch these up, still get outside of the tent, grab your weapon, go to a fighting position.
Yep.
So
point.
something worth looking into, even if you're just, camping. But they're nice. Keep your
sure.
feet warm.
So from water, moving into food, one thing I learned in these truly cold conditions is that literally everything freezes.
Yep.
Whether it be your boots, leather, every single thing that you own will freeze solid. So, and that goes to food. Water, you can't, of course, let freeze solid because you will die very quickly. You can go 3 days without water, but I will tell you from experience that after about 48 hours, you are basically useless and you are just waiting to die at that point. When it comes to food, your fat asses can go much longer without food. Your food, no matter what you do, is gonna freeze solid. There is not a damn thing you can do about it. So you need to make sure that you have food that can survive being frozen. And then when you're ready to eat, put that shit in your pocket about an hour to 2 hours, depending on how cold it is, before you're ready to eat, and just munch. Typically, I'd use granola bars, little those bars we'd make with peanut butter and protein and all that kind of stuff. The best thing that I can recommend is fat. Fat is gonna warm you up in an Arctic condition so much faster than anything else. Protein especially is really gonna mess you up. It pulls a lot of water, a lot of calories, so you gotta eat like a fat body. Carbs and fat is what's gonna keep you warm. It's immediate energy, and you can literally feel the warmth moving through you. I can think of being in the Arctic and getting a piece of fat from an animal and eating it and just
You feel your body
you can feel it immediately.
Sure. And also fats are, you pay the least amount of weight penalty.
You do.
For fats. So when you look at energy density in food, a bottle of olive oil, although you would think that is very heavy.
Don't just bring a bottle of olive oil, by the
just
way.
an example. But you would think it's very heavy. It's actually, for per calorie density, it's the lightest thing that you could bring is literally a bottle of liquid. So, think when you're planning your meals or thinking about it, if you have the luxury, on your own, you should be looking at a lot of fats. You're going to need double rations.
Yes.
Is for combat sustainment is what the Army would tell you. The Army does issue 2 MRE variations for cold weather
They
environment.
still freeze solid, dude.
They do,
Yeah.
do, but they're going to carry you in that, getting below 30 degrees. If you're in that range, 0 to 30 or whatever, you're going to have a better chance at preparing those meals
Agreed,
and eating
yeah.
them. They also come. There's a cold weather MRE. I think the cold
Also
weather and the
freezes
alert.
solid.
They do.
Yeah.
They all freeze, but they're freeze dried. Whereas
they do
a normal MRE is solid.
100%.
It's just it has a lot of liquid content. It's gonna freeze solid. The cold weather MREs have double the rations in them. So double snacks, double main meals, all that. So you have more energy density there.
Whatever food you choose, make sure that you try the diet for a couple days to a week before you just have it with you. Because
before you need it.
The last thing you want to be doing is just shitting your brains out and dying.
Exactly.
That's
yeah.
a great. That's a great
Another
way to
die. Dumb way to die.
Dumb ways. To
Yeah,
die.
dumb ways to die.
Put
That's
that
it.
in there, Micah.
Micah, can you put that in?
Mike, put that in.
Micah doesn't want to be like. It's like I'm not gonna put that in.
He knows we'll forget.
Yeah, that's really funny, guys. So from water and food, we go into our basic combat loadouts here. We're gonna speak pretty generally. There's a lot to be said. So going to our rifle setups here, pretty basic, but you don't want your rifle just to be a straight black blob. You want to make sure that it is on its own camouflaged. Again, there's a lot of variation even in Arctic environments or cold environments. And then if you really want to break up your rifle a little bit more, you don't need to go crazy.
No.
Add a little bit of Coband, a little bit of white tape, and it's going to do a lot to break up the outline of your gun. I see a lot of people going ham where they're like completely spray painting their guns white, and unless you're in a truly Arctic environment, I generally don't recommend that.
I don't recommend it either.
Now, going to optics and lube as well are going to be the kind of 2 main considerations for me when it comes to my rifle. So first off, optics, especially anything that's battery powered, and this is going to kind of carry over into a couple other things, but your batteries are going to die really, really fast unless you have that really special aim point optic that's made for the Arctic. Anything else is going to die quickly because once the battery gets cold and it's turned on, it drains it super quick. I generally recommend some type of prism or some type of well-built, low-powered variable optic or something like that. In this case, we have an ATACR from Night Force. Those work really well. LCAN Spectres, ACOGs, they tend to survive. A lot of the optics that aren't rated for those environments, they will break teeth on the ratcheting mechanisms and they'll fail. So find something that's robust and that's going to work. And again, try it in the environment before you actually just rely on it wholly. A big thing is going to be scope caps. In this case, we have the scope caps from 100 Concepts, which is one of my favorite new scope caps. I really love them. Have you seen those?
Yeah, I use them as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do.
We're best friends.
There we go.
They're super cool. You need to have scope caps. If you don't have scope caps, you're going to get water on your lens, or you're going to get snow in your lens, and it's going to freeze, and then you're going to go to bring your weapon up to shoot whoever you need to shoot, an armed polar bear, and you're just going to see ice, and you're going to die.
Yep.
Just immediate death.
Yeah, we talk a lot about this, optics, batteries, keeping your batteries close to your body.
Yes.
Like you do. Actually, if you're a military and you have a PVS 31 issued, the battery pack is actually, the designation is a cold weather battery pack, right?
Amazing.
So, wear the battery pack in the cold weather or else your nods are going to die in an hour or something like that.
Sooner.
Yeah, it's like very, very short.
It's that meme at JBLM. It's like it's like raining and cold, and you turn on your PVS 31s. It's like immediate flashing red.
Yeah, it's immediate red.
Because that means it's about to die.
The battery's
and
dead.
You just scream at the sky.
And the optics are, preserving your optics is critical.
Mm-hmm.
It's really critical. I like setups that have duality like this, something a red
The
dot.
duality of man.
A duality of optics. So
there
you have something that is just magnified and is not battery operated. You also have something on the top that you can rapidly use if you need to.
That will die within a couple days.
That's going to be dead.
Within a couple days.
So you're going to be point shooting after that. But another consideration with rifles is that you actually, supersonic ammunition being fired out of a rifle in a cold weather environment is actually going to create a fog. It's a vapor stream. It's vapor as it cuts through the air. Not everybody's seen Bullet Trace. Some people say they've seen it. They've never seen it, but it's
it seems oddly
it's
personal,
out there.
but
yeah, it's oddly personal. You're gonna see that when you're shooting long range. but it's happening every time you shoot. You're cutting through, there's a vapor trail, and then that vapor trail turns to ice if it's cold enough, very, very rapidly. So if you're in a fighting position, you'll be firing, and that vapor will be coming back, that ice layer will be coming back towards your weapon, getting into your optic lenses. They're going to start freezing up. Your eye pro, if you're wearing it, is going to start having those issues. So in cold weather, you know, if you're holding a position, you're always building. Every position actually has two positions, and the shooter is going to transition between the two positions because that vapor line is actually going to be directly in your line of sight.
Yeah.
So yeah, weapon considerations. And
Hey.
lubricants next.
Yep, lubricants. Have a cold weather lubricant. There's tons out there.
There are.
You need to completely degrease your weapon
Yes.
before you put that lube in, because any bit of that lube that's not rated for that environment will freeze absolutely fucking solid, and it's over at that point. Another consideration is not bringing your weapon in. You talked about it. Do you want to explain that to people? I'm sure it's very confusing.
Yeah, so generally you're going to have some kind of, on a military side, you're going to have some kind of Arctic tent. You're gonna set this thing up. It's very quick when you are trained to do it. You're gonna set it up. You're gonna start warming the tent. You're gonna be rotating sentries in and out of the tent, and there's gonna be a mass of guys who are trying to sleep in the tent at any given time. All those people who are in the tent, their weapons are actually going to be staged. Normally you'll dig some kind of weapons rack out of snow, and then you're just going to stage the weapons. When you bring a cold item into a hot environment, it starts to condensate.
Yep.
That condensation will freeze the minute you get back outside. If it's really condensated, get into your bolt carrier group, and that will freeze just shut.
Good
so
night.
you go, it could cause your weapon to actually explode. Lots of issues. So you want to keep them out. Weapons maintenance still has to be conducted, especially on the machine guns.
Yeah.
Who's a great resource for this is if you have any Canadian Army friends, they are very familiar with what lubricants work at what temperature variations. Hit them up for sure. One of the guys who knows a lot about this is Wardall up in Canada. He can tell you specific temperature variations. And they say use this kind of lubricant. That's what he learned in his time in the Canadian military. Yeah, condensation is bad. If you're bringing a machine gun in, you're going to let it reach the temperature of the tent. You're going to completely clean it, complete disassembly, clean everything, get it back into service, re-lubricate it, put it back out in the field. So
take care of your weapons.
Yeah.
It's going to be the big thing. So from our weapons, we're going to be talking a little bit about our combat loadouts and our sustainments. So we'll go ahead and put that on. Obviously, here on Grand Thumb, we have banned the Spirit of Systems kit because it's just so bad, right, Micah?
It's really good, yeah.
appreciate it.
Just kidding. We love Spirit of Systems kit. We use a bunch of it. So talking about combat loadouts, obviously our two combat loadouts, our kits are going to be different based on what we're doing. So I'm talking more to a survival aspect of it. So for me, my chest rig is simply to hold ammunition. We have the Recce rig from my company. Of course, I got to rep my own stuff.
Yeah,
right?
it's good.
Good
rig.
Thank you. Your rig is really nice too.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So we have the Recce rig right here, so I can hold quite a bit of mags. I also have some general purpose pouches, one not released, and of course I do have a Spirit Assistance pouch right here, so I can add either magazines, I can add extra gear, equipment, whatever I need to have on me. But the point is, this is for a react to contact, putting a mass amount of fire out as I need it right there. Now, I also do have integration with my pack itself. So on my pack, I also do have magazine pouches. Again, Spirit's magazine pouches, good job. Because you never know what you're gonna need. In this case, in our Spirit's pouches right here, we have our typical surprise grenades. It's actually incendiary, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. You wanna pop it?
Yeah, let's do it.
So whatever you may need in there, on the opposite side, in more temperate environments, I carry a lot of bug juice on me because I don't want to die. Typically in these environments, I'll have some type of rangefinder or some type of small pair of binoculars or something like that. I might switch the pouch out because you need to be able to ID, and especially in an Arctic, like a truly Arctic environment, it's really hard to tell distance. So I like those small things to help me out just a little bit. Do you want to talk to your kit? Your kit's a little bit more full featured than what I have on.
Yeah, so again, kit's very personal.
Yeah.
And your job role is going to change, based on whatever unit you're in and what kind of actions you're taking. I still prefer to have some kind of split rig on the front. In the Arctic warfare piece of this, I like to be able to adjust my rig for prone, right? So I like to be able to just basically unclip and push this to the side so that I can be in the prone. I also can buckle this behind my back while I'm manipulating my ski poles, things like that. So I like to get it kind of out of the way when I'm doing that, more of like a kind of like a backpack on there. But really the principles are the same.
Yep.
You know, prioritizing ammo storage on the front. I carry big GP pouches, and it's variable as to what they might hold. If it's getting cold enough, I might be taking all of my batteries out of my GP where they normally are, and I might be putting them inside of my, you know, my layers.
Absolutely.
Inside of my hand warmer, where my, you know, like where I can keep them close to my body, and a little bit more, a little more heat on them, so they're not dying immediately when I put them back in my PBS 31s. So yeah, I mean that's essentially it. It's not really changing much from, you know, my combat load in any other environment.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, so a little bit different. Again, mine's more for pack integration, for moving over long distances. This is much more for whether it be ski pole manipulation or getting into fighting positions.
Yeah, sure.
It's going to depend on what you're doing.
Exactly.
It's very personal. No one's gonna make fun of you.
Well, what I would say though is that multicam, we're both wearing multicam, and this is something that is, somebody in the comments will talk about how this should be alpine. And we've actually sold quite a few alpine rigs to some of the mountain warfare centers in the U.S.
Sure.
For guys
I thought you were
who
about to
are
say somebody in California.
some people in California as well, but people who are
Very
working in a alpine environment constantly, who are like, we're always in the snow, right? That it makes a lot of sense to have one. I would still argue that color variation. This is adding a lot of variation to wearing it over the overwhite. You have a lot of color variation on the front. Is going to just help him blend in better. He's not going to look like a white blob anymore. So your kid is fine.
Abominable snowman.
Abominable snowman.
It's like
it's breaking up your image, and it's the right answer. So don't fret having, you know, multicam or arid or whatever.
I like that word, fret.
Yeah, don't fret.
That's good.
Yeah, don't be sad. Just wear it over the top of your overwhite, and you'll be fine.
And that's a whole argument right there about putting overwhites over your kid or not.
Sure, it just depends on where you are. I mean, again, if you're in a completely white environment, what I like to do is I look at the horizon. And that making a decision almost maybe multiple times a day of if we're going to remove overwhite tops, we're going to put them back on. You might just throw it over because like, hey, we're passing through a lot of hilly terrain that's open, and we're going to throw our tops back on. I like to look at the horizon, and if there's a lot of white above, then I'm putting my overwhite top on. If there's a lot of white below and a lot of green above, I'm going to just adjust based on that. You don't really have to think too much about it.
And that brings us right to packs, actually, because with your pack, you should have some type of cover. You should be making sure that it's camouflage. So when I used to teach survival back in the day, of course, when we were in a forest environment, we'd break off little fronds and stuff, and you tuck them in your pack, and you'd make yourself a little bit more camouflage by adding a little bit of vegetation. And then because people are lazy, because students are lazy in general, you'd move a couple clicks, and then you're in a completely different environment with bushes on you that make zero fucking sense.
Yeah, they're not in there. They're not in that
So you need to make sure that you're changing your camouflage based on your environment. And if you're traversing terrain, 100% you will be switching layers, you will be switching camouflages. It's just part of the game. You'll be updating your face camo, your hand camo. Everything will be constantly updating. So you're not just gonna hop out into the environment and be like, I am good until...
Especially in a winter warfare.
Yeah.
It's gonna change, if not daily, if not multiple times.
100% right there. So before we finish up with combat sustainment, I wanna talk about helmets. And the biggest thing is not going blind. Going blind in the snow is a very real thing. Snow blindness, essentially you're getting a sunburn on your eyelids. It is the most unbearably painful thing to get. Have you gotten it before?
I've never had it fully, but I've started to feel the itchiness.
It's horrible.
Yeah, it's like sand in your eyes.
It feels so terrible, and if you get it, it is a long recovery. And you can actually go temporarily.
Yeah, absolutely. Temporarily blind.
You can actually go temporarily blind for a little bit. So make sure that we keep that from happening. As you can see, we both have goggles on. So you don't want to speak a little bit to how you have that mounted on your helmet?
Yeah. So for me, goggles. We're gonna keep the goggles off our helmet unless we are, we think that there's the potential for us to begin skiing, essentially, right? Or the weather is going to turn and start blowing in our faces. So we're going to take the goggles on and off the helmet as needed. We're going to store them in the little pouch that the goggles come with, just to prevent the lenses from getting scratched. We would modify ours with, we basically just cut the strap down and have Velcro sewn on the straps.
Very high speed.
And just so that you can easily switch them from the back to the front, and you can tighten them up, and wear them with your helmet still, right? Yes. And another variation, which I think you have yours set up.
I sure do.
To have them underneath the ear pro, so that when you pull the goggle down, it's in the correct position, if you have ear pro.
One time I jumped out of a plane with just it over my helmet. That ear pro is somewhere in Washington
gone.
right now. Yeah, she gone. So make sure that you do have it mounted under. So hear me, Grantham, coming out from the Battle of Hoth. Is that what is that what you want me to say? Are you trying to make fun of me?
The way you phrased it a little bit though.
Yeah, that was really stupid. Whatever. The Hoth troopers actually had good kit. First off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of weird, I don't know, vests.
Yeah, and
that
variations. And they had those cool.
A lot of quilting.
Yeah. Anyhow, if you have the goggles on your helmet, highly recommended to have some type of cover on there.
Yep.
It's also going to protect them from getting scratched up and that type of thing. If they're living on your helmet or even not, they should have a home that they go to make sure, because a scratch goggle sucks. And that kind of gets us to the end of our iPro right there to ensure that we're not going to die. Finally is going to be sustainment. So generally, you're going to have a pack on you.
Yes.
There are many packs out there, and the coolest thing about every pack is that a simple Alice ruck is perfectly acceptable and probably one of the better options, actually.
It is. Yep.
They rock, you can go prone, you can look up, and they are awesome. They're not the most comfortable, but they're extremely capable and they're extremely cheap. So as cool as Hill People gear is and Stone Glacier, these packs are awesome, but you can get by with much cheaper stuff, and I hope you guys understand that from watching this video as a whole. But getting into it, obviously camouflage your pack, have some type of pack cover on at all times. In general, I keep my pack covers somewhere near the top so I can get to them. Most packs aren't waterproof. Now the Stone Glacier that you have right there that's actually a really awesome pack. So depending on what you have, make sure you have some type of pack cover or to camouflage it, obviously. As far as what you want in your pack, it's going to depend on what you're doing. So when it comes to what I'm doing with more of the survival stuff, I have a lot of kit for holing up. So I have like an actual sleeping bag with an inflatable mat, or I could just use one of the old United States government mats that work really well. Just cut them down to length because you don't need all 9 feet of them.
Sure.
And that's because I'm actually going to be sleeping a little bit more because I'm living this out. I'm actually out there for months, for years. Now in combat operations, you might be doing a lot less sleeping. You might simply be sleeping in your static layers that you have on you, your big high loft layers and that type of stuff. Beyond the clothing that you have, and that's typically going to be towards the bottom, especially your sleeping stuff. Other things I'm going to be recommending for a more survival type situations is going to be an axe. I almost always recommend them. You can do a lot with an axe. You can rebuild civilization with an axe, so I almost always have one on me. I typically measure it up against my pack. I cut it to size. It's not as capable, but it is much easier to travel with.
Yeah, so military guys who are not on the SEER side don't really have a choice about what they're going to carry.
They're
right?
ordered to carry a bunch of bullshit.
You're going to carry a lot of stuff. I had recommendations like the booties, things that can help you. You're going to have a lot of grenades, a lot of ammunition. But as far as sleep kit goes, regardless of the mission, if I'm in a winter warfare environment, I will at least have something like this. This is Kifaru or Kifaru or Kaifaru or however you want to say it. Kifaru, this is their whoopee, and it's a synthetic climate shield filled blanket, essentially. Minimum. Minimum is what I'm going to bring. We want to avoid, the stuff we would use in the civilian market, down feather, sleeping bags, high loft. They're great. They're not going to work in the military environment.
Yeah.
The minute that they get wet, they're going to lose all that insulation value.
Instant death.
Yeah, it's not a good time. Ask me how I know. But the same thing you're saying, getting yourself up off the ground. This is an inflatable mat.
Good and bad.
They're good and bad. There's a lot of arguments about R value. There's a lot of arguments about a lot of stuff on the internet. I will tell you that an inflatable mat works better in a cold weather environment. I don't care what anybody says, it works better. But I would usually pair this up with a foam mat as well. I'd have a foam mat on the bottom. I'd have this on the top. But at a minimum, I'm bringing this whoopee and this in my kit, even if the mission does not call for an overnight, because almost every mission I've ever been on, you get stuck, right? You get stuck somewhere, and I'm not going to not carry this. It's very lightweight.
Sure.
And have the ability to use this in different positions. I can pull this out. It's a blanket. You just put it over me. And I can also use that inflatable mat. I can not inflate it and just use it as a ground cover, and then get on it there. So it gives me a little adaptability. But we're going all the way up to full 3-piece military sleeping bags for Arctic conditions. You might have all of it. You might be sleeping on top of the sleeping system and just have it like using the sleeping bag as a blanket.
Yeah.
Or if you're somewhere that's pretty safe, you might get completely down to your base layers and be comfortable inside the sleeping bag.
And a lot of people come out there and be like, well, you can take boughs off a tree
Sure.
and then you can make a bough bed. Yes, however, that is a huge footprint.
Huge footprint and a lot of energy.
Exactly.
A lot
So
of energy.
try to be smart with it. Of course, there are more natural means to do a lot of this stuff, but it might not be, you might not have the time, nor will you have the energy.
Sure.
Depending on what is happening and how much fighting you're doing, which is why if we can, making our lives a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Because traveling and building a bow bed, I've done it. I had to do it for a SEER when I was becoming
Sure.
an instructor. It sucked. Bow bed at every new location. It was like I can't say the word on YouTube. It was the stupidest thing I could have possibly done. I hate it. Now beyond that, obviously, food, we want to keep that about mid-pack. It's going to freeze solid. And then water, generally don't have it in my pack.
Yep.
10 degrees to 32, it'll be fine. And then any other accoutrements or anything else that you want in there, speedballs, ammunition, grenades, all that kind of stuff is going to fit in there. Point is, take the essentials. What I've found with packs, and I've talked about this in the past, go out with your pack. The first time I went out as a new troop with my pack, I had like every damn thing I was issued in there, and it sucked. And then over the years, over 5-10 years of doing this, I pared it down to a very minimalistic set of things that I carry. If you want to learn more about packs and setting that up, watch our earlier recce videos. We go pretty in depth into it. That's not the purpose of this video, but use your shit is going to be the big thing. And that brings us to the end of kind of our winter combat survival. There's a lot more about the survival aspect to it because the Arctic and the cold conditions are so brutal, which is why we wanted to make sure that we talked about them so much. Before we kind of finish up, is there anything else you want to add that we haven't talked about yet?
Just that it's really, this is just a primer
Yeah.
to get your kind of like, just kind of get your mind
Your
in the right
juices.
spot. Your juices
Juices
flowing. Like,
flowing.
hey, what considerations do I actually need to look at? Like, what am I going to be battling against? It's not just it's not just get an over white top and you're good. It's really considering temperature ranges.
Yes.
Kevin over there, you can't see him, but he's off camera. He's here. He has a very good layering series that's coming out that talks about basically his layering kit. He spent a lot of time in the mountains, experimenting with different. He has a really good flavor of things. So you really have to get out there and wear your stuff. And you should be recording. It's not hard to just have a Kestrel and go out and be like, what temperature is it? What's the wind speed? How do I feel right now? Then like, hey, this fleece isn't going to help me when it's below 15 and the wind's blowing.
Exactly.
You need to know that information.
Experience it. The first time I experienced negative 50 and below was a real eye opener to what my body was capable of, what my clothing was capable of, and what my equipment was capable of. And it was a very humbling time for me. And I still have injuries from it to this day. The frost nip never really goes away.
Yep.
You're very much so susceptible to it. So make smart choices, get out there, actually do it. That's what life's about. And thank you guys so much for watching. Get in there, comment with some of your own stuff that you've used, and make it a good comment section. And with all that said, guys, we've got nothing else for you. You know what's next.
What?
Dad advice.
Oh God,
Yeah,
I forgot.
you gotta give your dad advice. Micah, how did he forget?
I forgot.
He didn't forget. He knew. He's ready.
No, I'm not ready. I got nothing.
You can't have nothing.
Yeah, I got
There's
nothing,
gotta be
dude.
life advice you want to give these people.
Oh, you're gonna zoom in?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
You gotta give some life advice for these people. They're lost.
What should I give life advice about?
You can't. Don't tell me. Kevin, don't tell.
Kevin.
Hey,
Kevin.
Kevin's up.
Oh no. Sorry, Kevin.
Yes, sir.
You're next, dude.
What life advice would you like to give?
Dad advice?
Yeah, dad advice.
See, it's hard.
Is it what about stepdad advice?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, stepdad advice,
Stepdad
dog.
advice. I need help. Give me some help.
Short for mean women and bad weed, dude.
Oh, no.
Oh. No, dad advice with Breck.
Keep coming from? How many people are here?